Greatness. It's something that's hard to define. Something that's incredibly broad, yet so distinct and so recognizable that it links all of us together. Greatness is something we all desire, whether it be from ourselves or the stuff around us. And sometimes things reach it, and sometimes things surpass it by such a gap that it redefines what it means to be great in the first place. Or sometimes it falls short, either right at the finish line or even before it tied its shoelaces. Today we're going to be talking about some games that in my opinion were almost great but fell short right at the finish line. We're going to start this off with Firewatch. Now I'm not gonna lie, this game doesn't really deserve to be here. Now what do I mean by that? The title of the video is games that were almost mashed to pieces. Now this game doesn't fit this criteria since, in my highly esteemed and objective opinion, it was just plain dog shit. A disaster of a game that was so bad that I actually wish I straight up never spent the time watching it in the first place. And that's saying something because there are a lot of games and media out there that are not great, but there's not a lot that makes you go through an existential crisis for wasting 3.5 hours of your life because of it. So I guess it actually pretty much belongs to its own category. Games that embody disappointment. So then why did I put this game in the video? Well, simple, because it was interesting and entertaining and actually solid pretty much throughout almost the entirety of the game. You're probably asking why am I contradicting myself? Well, that's the thing. The game was amazing almost the entire time. Almost. So I'll just give a quick rundown on the plot. We play as Henry, a guy who took up a job as a fire lookout in a forest as a means to distract himself from his life. Even though being a lookout is usually a lonely job, a guy has Delilah, his supervisor, to keep him company on the radio. And while our boy does his job, it becomes apparent that something sinister is going on. His lookout gets trashed. Maybe Delilah is hiding something?
Look, I'm sorry. Can you hold that thought? Heyo. I don't think so. Why, have you? Okay, good. No, I don't think he has any idea.
Who was that?
Who was who?
Communication lines are deliberately cut off, and it eventually becomes very obvious that someone is watching Henry and listening in on his conversations with Delilah.
Someone has written down what we said to each other, have been saying.
And also it seems like whoever it is isn't exactly very friendly. And on top of that, it seems like it might not just be one person.
I'm in their main tent.
What's it like?
It's definitely some sort of monitoring station.
So we keep playing the game to find out what's happening, getting our expectations raised higher and higher since the game keeps feeding our imaginations about what's going on and what it could be until the very end, where it's finally revealed that, drumroll please. Well, there was nothing to actually care about. Apparently years ago, a lookout and his son were hiking in the forest. The son went into a cave by himself and accidentally died there.
Ah, shit.
So once the dad found out what happened to him, he just decides to stop anyone that came close to finding out, and that's it. That's the basic gist of the story. Okay, tragic, sure, but compared to the image the game was intentionally trying to put in our heads of maybe a serial killer or a shady organization that could potentially strike our hero at any moment for unknown reasons, that's pretty boring. And I get that maybe it's supposed to be some sort of message that not everything is exciting and sometimes life is just boring and cruel or whatever and you shouldn't use escapism as a means to fix it. But I'm not gonna lie, that just sounds like a lot of pretentious cope for a shitty ending. An ending so shitty that it actually invalidates the entire game. Because for me at least, the entire game's allure is the mystery of what's happening in the forest. Of course it has other strong aspects like its style and dialogue, but the main emphasis of the entire game without question is the mystery, since that is the main thing they lean into with its short runtime of 3.5 hours, and they spend most of it building the mystery without building much else. So once it fails, it's like a roller coaster ride with everything but the drop. It's like a barbecue party without the barbecue. In mystery games like these, the destination mattered just as much or even more than the journey. Because if the destination sucks, it can invalidate the entire journey in the first place. Which simply rings way too true for this game. Because what else is there to the game? Of course, story games in general are known for having great replayability compared to other types of games, but in this one, what else is there? It's basically a walking simulator with its emphasis being story. But since you know the story and also know that there's no real mystery to care about in said story, why would you want to try this game again? Apparently, people do still like this, but for me personally, it's pretty much just the embodiment of what disappointment looks like if it were a video game. Let's just move on to the next game. The next game is probably without question the most traumatic of the bunch. 12 minutes. Now, Firewatch's entire game is basically invalidated by its ending, while this one actually carries itself pretty well throughout and is better than Firewatch in my opinion. But its ending is how do I put this? Well, if you think Firewatch's ending was bad and ruined the rest of the game, well, you might have to sit down for this one because it'll make you wish you were blind and deaf and dead so that you didn't have to experience it. Alright, let's go over a basic summary of the game. Now, this game is not just a walking simulator like Firewatch. It's actually the most unique game we're going to be talking about, as it's like Groundhog's Day. Basically, we are chilling in our apartment with our wife and get visited by a strange dude who interrogates us. And based off our actions, things can go alright or end with us being dead. Yay. But the thing is, each time we go through 12 minutes, or die beforehand, we restart the 12 minutes with the info we had earlier, making an interesting game where we eventually, through trial and error, learn more and more about the predicament we are in, and the story and history of the characters involved. And to keep it short, the main plot twist of the game is that the wife of our main protagonist is his sister. If you think you misheard me, go ahead and rewind that shit back, because I'm not even gonna repeat what I just said because of how foul of a statement that is. And it's not like a I didn't know kind of situation. No, he was fully aware. If the roller coaster drop of Firewatch was a nothing burger, the roller coaster drop of 12 minutes is incest. Now, you might hate me for saying this, but I think 12 minutes makes Firewatch's ending look not as bad as it did before. Now, apparently, the entire game could just be the imagination of the protagonist and his sick desires. But let's be honest here, does that really make much of a difference in the grand scheme of things? Just because it didn't happen doesn't change the fact you were dreaming of your sister's cheat. You know what, let's just move on to the next game. This is just wild, bro. Now, this game right here, in my opinion, is the perfect representation of a game that genuinely could have been a complete masterpiece. This game right here is the reason why this video even exists. I was just watching a Tunari video until he brought up Sleeping Dogs.
Are there any obscure video game series you'd recommend? Sleeping Dogs is one of the greatest games I've ever played, and I honestly don't think that shit is ever talked about enough. So that would probably be my first recommendation.
Which made me remember how perfectly it fits this category, since in an alternate timeline, this could have been among the greatest games to have ever been made. But instead, it slowly lets itself down by the end of the game. Don't get me wrong, I loved the premise of the game, which is exactly why I think the game was such a letdown. Unlike Firewatch, it's still an amazing game, but its potential was so much more than what we got. And by the way, I'm only referring to the story of the game, not about the other aspects like the gameplay. And the reason why I think it was short of being a complete masterpiece was simply because of the second half of the game and the ending. Okay, the main premise of the game is basically our protagonist's role to take down a powerful gang in Hong Kong, the Sun On Yee, which he's the most perfect candidate for since he actually grew up there. This gave him a personal connection to some of the characters in the game, for better or for worse.
Oh, Mimi. Oh, yeah. First girl ever sucked my cock. Yeah, so what?
Razor, brother.
And I was the first guy who ever stabbed you. Remember me now?
Whoa.
I like how throughout the entire game it said that even though Wei is an unstoppable machine like all the other protagonists from the games of this era, that he can't just go in there and single-handedly stop the gang and some of its heads like Dog Eyes and his even more powerful associate, Big Smile Lee.
I will get to the point. You must realize that you cannot stand against Big Smile Lee alone.
That's what everyone tells me.
So he takes a different approach by breaking the gang from the inside out by gaining influence and rising in power. which is an amazing premise since he actually gets closer to the members of the gang like Jackie and Winston, but also still has to fulfill his duty as a cop and destroy the gang, which causes more and more tension as the game progresses, since he obviously has to pick and betray a side by the end. And they treat this seriously for most of the game. We simply take subtle jabs, simple steps that slowly change the tide in the favor of the red pole we work for. Until suddenly that said guy and his wife gets murdered on their wedding day, which included Uncle Po, the leader of the entire gang, getting shot in the process. It seemed like it was another gang who had orchestrated the attack, but something was off, and it seemed like someone else could have been pulling the strings, and eventually that was proven to be true. It was the doing of another red pole which we had beef with since literally the start of the game. Dog Eyes. So what did our boy Wei do? Let me guess, he did something that crippled Dog Eye's control and influence to have a better shot at getting rid of him? Like proving to Uncle Po that he's the one responsible for the attack, thus leading to him getting demoted and easier to attack?
Nope.
I'm not kidding when I say he just randomly finds him, jumps him, and yeah, that's pretty much the end of Dog Eyes. Look, I have no problem with that. Clearly Wei is a machine, but like, why didn't we just do this earlier? Because it would cause a gang war? I mean, yeah, I guess that does make sense. Just because we could beat Dog Eyes whenever we wanted doesn't mean we can just jump the Big Smile Lee. He is the strongest red pole after all. Even Wei knows that he can't just walk in there and... Oh. Never mind then. Yeah, so I guess we could have literally soloed the entire gang at any moment we felt like. Which is fine, I guess. And pretty much the premise for every other video game at the time, like Far Cry. But it kind of beats the point of everything we did earlier, since we went off the idea that we were more or less subtly and realistically breaking down the gang through witty and clever moves. Granted with the unstoppable power of Wei, but still, moves and decisions that felt possible. But this is all thrown out of the window since in the end we just decide to solo them anyway. And that wouldn't have been so disappointing if the game didn't start off so strong with its double agent premise, and then get completely ditched for your old school I slapped the shit out of everyone and called it a day solution. Either way, that wraps up all the games we'll be covering, and look, I'm not even saying the following games are even bad. Except Firewatch, that shit just sucks ass. But besides that, both Sleeping Dogs and yes, even 12 Minutes with its Sweet Home Alabama ass plot twist are still pretty good. Because 12 Minutes, incest aside, is an incredibly unique and well written game with many twists and turns from start to finish. It's just that the last twist made me wish I squeezed lemon juice into my eyes. But that aside, I still can't deny that its good outweighs its bad. It's just that there is something that links all of these three very different games. If you've been paying attention, you might have spotted a common theme among all of them. A weapon all of them used effectively but got burned by in the end. The weapon being expectation. Firewatch, 12 Minutes, Sleeping Dogs all build tremendous expectation in their beginnings while having endings that pretty much either disappoint or are so bad that I wish I never experienced them in the first place. Now look, building strong expectations for something isn't a bad idea. If you can meet those expectations, otherwise you can leave your audiences disappointed, because expectation is like a double-edged flamethrower. So stick with me here. You can cook but also get cooked if you use it incorrectly. And sadly, in my opinion, that is exactly what happened to the following games. Could they have done things differently? Well, for 12 Minutes probably not, since the entire plot and story would be different if they changed the Alabama twist. But for Firewatch and Sleeping Dogs, I think they could have. Especially for Sleeping Dogs. Who knows, maybe if they do a remaster of the game and change the second half of the game, maybe we'll get the Sleeping Dogs that we never got to see. But either way, that wraps up the video, and not gonna lie, the video has been a bit gloomy since all we talked about were games that ruined themselves. So to end it on a more positive note, I'll recommend some masterpieces that you might have not heard of that you could give a try. Here they are. To the Moon. It's an older JRPG, but from what I remember, it's simply amazing, and if you don't trust my memory, it has a 10 out of 10 on Steam. So yeah, pretty solid. The next one is a lot more dark and scary, but it's still amazing nonetheless. The game being Still Wakes the Deep. And there are more amazing games out there like Undertale, Red Dead Redemption 2, etc, but I can't think of any more underrated ones on top of my head right now, and the script is getting way too long. So I'll call it there. See ya.